Hello and welcome to Free Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes, and I am sorry that I'm running quite late for our usual live broadcast. However, I just a little under the weather. My wife got the worst of it, but what can you do? You live in a house with people, you're bound to have some things stir up once in a while. So, here we go. Today, we're going to be talking about Christ as the only exit. Before we get into it, though, if you like what we're doing here at Freed Indeed Ministries, if you find it useful, please like the video, hit that like button down below, and subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell icon so that you receive updates every time we make a new video. That helps the channel grow. And most importantly, if you're in a financial position to do so, we do have a membership program. So there's a link in the description below. You can follow for that. It gives you member exclusives like our member exclusive book club and other member exclusive content like our video Why Not Hinduism, which is a very interesting video um, about kind of discussing the a Pascal's wager type wager, but about Hinduism. So, all of that is interesting, all of that is useful, and I hope that you'll check that out. In the meantime, today's topic is this quote from Seraphim Rose. If you do have any questions during the broadcast, feel free to ask them in the chat. If you have questions after the broadcast is done, post them in the comments below. So, here we go. So we see here, this is from Father Seraphim Rose, the late great Father Seraphim Rose. And the quote is Christ is the only exit from the world. All other exits, sexual rapture, political utopia, economic independence, are but blind alleys in which rot the corpses of many who have tried them. So, so I want to talk about this quote a little bit because I think this quote is so deeply important. And one of the things that I really love about this quote is that I think it shows us how the sort of American dream, so to speak, is not a Christian concept. Um, and in fact, the American way is not Christian. It's not a Christian mentality. And this may be difficult for some folks, but bear with me. So, the United States measures itself based on this very capitalistic idea of success, this worship of capital and of economic independence and these sorts of things, which is fine to a degree. It's okay that there are wealthy people on earth and there are also poor people on earth. And Jesus said, "The poor you'll always have with you." And it's not actually a sin to be wealthy or to be poor. Neither of those two things is a sin in and of itself. What you do with those things can be sinful, but what Father Seraphim Rose is talking about here isn't really about being wealthy. It's about the fact that, another quote somebody said that was really good was the gospel is the Christianity is let me just see if I can find the quote really fast because it's so good and I don't want to mess it up. But Yeah, so this is an interesting concept. We tend to think that we need to be. Here's the quote: Christianity is about helping others and controlling yourself. When it becomes about controlling others and helping yourself, it is no longer Christianity. That quote was posted by the Celtic Tradition a couple of days ago, a few days ago now. So, um, the Celtic could the Celtic tradition here is saying something that's very profound. Christianity is about helping others and controlling yourself. But when it becomes about controlling others and helping yourself, it's no longer Christianity. This is this is something that I think is easy to lose sight of because we tend to want there's a couple of reasons why we tend to depart from this simple way that Father Seraphim and that the Celtic Christian Tradition Facebook page are talking about. One of them is the fact that we really want to feel in control of situations. We don't like the idea that we're not in control. But ultimately, God is the one who's in control, and we have to rest in that sovereignty of God. If we're unable or unwilling to do that, then we fall. And oftentimes, we may even have the best of intentions. We may think, if only I could be in charge of this situation, if only I could control this situation, then things would be so much better. If only everybody would, and maybe you're right. If only everybody would do things this way, then everything would be great. And maybe it's true. Maybe it really would help people and improve people's lives, but ultimately, as difficult as this is to understand, it's not our place to control other people's decisions, and it's not our place to control the way the world operates. God is ultimately the one who is bringing all things to fruition, and God is ultimately the one we have to trust, even when things are going wrong. And so, but oftentimes, see, this is why Father Seraphim brings up several specific things here. So, the first thing he brings up is sexual rapture. So, what's the problem with trying to find find your exit from the world in sexual rapture? Well, for one thing, maybe you get married to a beautiful woman and you encounter sexual rapture that way. Well, for one thing, if sex is your fundamental goal, then it's never going to be enough. Um, you, it's never going to be enough. Um, you know, uh, like Barney from How I Met Your Mother, constantly having sex with different women and all this, but it's never enough. He's never satisfied. And that's the problem with the passions. The passions are never satisfied. If you're a glutton, you can eat and eat and eat, but it's never satisfying. If you're a sexual deviant, the you can have the pinnacle perfect sexual encounter. That's exactly what you want it to be, and it's not going to be enough. You'll now have some new height of desire that you want to reach. So that's that's the problem with chasing any of the passions, but especially sexuality, is that you're never going to truly satiate the desire, not in a permanent or sustainable way. So that can't be the exit from the world. That can't be what takes you out of the pain and suffering and shame and guilt and self-destruction and the problems of the world, that that can't be what does it, because it'll never truly work. It'll never truly bring you to fruition. There's also political utopia. This is the goal of communism. And it's interesting that when I talk to atheistic people, they usually will say things um, like in response to this quote, they'll say, well, I shouldn't desire an exit from the world. I should desire to make the world a better place. Then this is the problem with religion. You want an exit from the world instead of making the world a better place. But in reality, political utopia is just another exit from the world. You're trying to change the world around you instead of changing yourself. You're trying to change the world around you to fit what you desire it to look like through political utopia. You're trying to exit the world as it is and create a new world. So that is yet another form of exit from the world. Here's the thing, atheists aren't the only ones who do this. Um, Postmillennialism is a good example of Christians who believe in political utopia. So, political utopian systems are extremely problematic and fundamentally mistaken. They're fundamentally flawed in their approach because, um, actually, the best treatment of this topic is from Father John Strickland, who has a book series called Paradise and Utopia, which is right here on my shelf. Right over here, we have Age of Paradise, we have Age of Division, and the Age of Utopia is somewhere. But anyway, so you can see it right there behind me. The Age of Paradise and the Age of Division, and I don't know where the Age of Utopia is. I think it might be on my bedside table. Anyway, point is that the his treatment on political utopias is awesome, because basically the fundamental issue is that in the first centuries of the church, you have this age of paradise. That's not to say that all of it is perfect, but it's to say that paradise is the place where God comes down and dwells with man. And in the very early church, the church became that paradise where man and God dwelt together in the church. But then there's the age of division, starting with the schism of between east and west. So you have this schism where where the church breaks, and so you have the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Western Catholic Church that go separate ways. This sparks the age of division, the Western Catholic Church fracturing into Protestantism and into all these different things. In the age of division, which is roughly speaking the Middle Ages, you have people trying to have God without paradise. So you have people trying to have God, but you're dividing and cutting asunder paradise. But utopia is even worse, because utopia gives up on having God but strives to have paradise. So paradise is where you have God and man together. The age of division is where you have God without paradise, and then the age of utopia is where you try to have paradise without God, and results in violence, it results in destruction, it results in terrorism. Islam is a great example of this. Islam has this effort to build a utopian society on earth. The communists, again, Nazism was an effort to build a utopian society on Earth. Granted, what Nazism promised, as H.G. or yeah, H.G. Wells, as H.G. Wells points out, what Nazism promises is actually horrible. Um, so it stretches the definition of utopia. But nevertheless, all of these ideals are utopian in nature. They seek to bring us to a utopian or really a dystopian society. And I think we still live in the age of utopia. We still live in the age where political powers are trying to bring about utopia. The problem is that it's not just leftists doing this, right wing people do it too. And so, the American political system is very much a spectrum of mostly just you have the right wing political agenda, which is largely sort of a semi socialistic capitalism, versus the left wing sort of agenda, which seems to be just complete anti Christian rhetoric, left and right. But not anti Christian. See, this is another thing. They're anti established Christianity, but they don't actually reject Christian principles. Like, as Tom Holland pointed out, most of these, other than Nazism, Tom Holland, who's himself an atheist, but in his book Dominion, he actually argues that the Nazis were the only consistent atheists, because communists actually still embrace Christian principles and Christian moral statements, Christian views on various things. For example, communists are still embracing the Christian ideal of equality, but they're embracing it in sort of a perverted sense because they take God out of it, so it perverts the system and destroys it. So, for the most part, utopianism doesn't reject Christianity outright; it just rejects the church, but it tries to keep the parts of Christianity that it likes. And you can always see this time and time again. So the next thing is economic independence. Well, economic independence, this is the sort of thing that like Amway promises. This is the sort of thing that um, kind of people that capitalism is all about, is this idea of economic independence where you are a producer and you need to produce and produce and produce, and you need to become wealthy, and by becoming wealthy then you'll be happy. A funny quote to that end is, money can't buy happiness, but it buys all the things that make me happy, and that's basically the same thing. Or money can't buy happiness, but it does buy ice cream, and that's basically the same thing. So there's sort of this, and that's something that goes around. Even I'm a big Godzilla fan, and I saw in one of my Godzilla fan groups somebody posted, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy the complete Godzilla collection, which is basically the same thing. And that one I'm tempted to agree with. But the thing is, economic independence will never truly provide for you this escape. It will never truly provide for you this hope. It will never truly, because just like with sexual rapture, it's never enough. You'll never have built the empire to the point where you're satisfied with it. And even if you do, what then? What is the next step? So now you get to live in nice houses and do nice things. Or if you're a really good person, you get to live in a, a nice house, but you get to provide for other people. You get to do good for other people. You get to do all this. Um, But when when is it enough? At what point do you give yourself over to God? At what point do you stop trying to be the master of all things, and let God be the one who's truly in charge? That's that's the question that you have to face if economic independence is your big thing. Again, economic independence isn't sinful. Actually, interestingly enough, a lot of these things, political utopia is kind of sinful, but a lot of people have good intentions when they set out to create these political utopias. A lot of people, you know, truly speaking, sexual rapture isn't in and of itself sinful. Um, you my uh marriage, that's not sinful. It's not sinful to be married and sexually desire your spouse, and these are good things. But yet the problem is when these things become idols, because when these things become our sort of all encompassing desire, become our escape, become our way of getting out of the rat race, become our way of moving into something, trying to move into something better, then they lose what is good about them and become something bad, because they pull you away from the source of all true goodness, which is God. And economic independence is no different. If you are trying to be, you know, if you're working really hard to try, and your big thing, all your goals are all of the things you're going to do with your money and all of the things that money can buy you, well, then ultimately you're in a situation where what you're doing is just another form of self-destruction. And I think Jesus said it best with his parable of the um man with the barn. And the barn, he fills up his barn with wheat, and he says, I'm going to build bigger barns and better barns, and I'm going to and I'm going to have this huge supply of wheat, and I'm going to be the one, the king of the market. And this is capitalism right here. I'm going to be the one who, I'm going to be made in the shade from here on out. And Jesus says, you fool, this very night you shall be called to account for your life. In other words, this very night you will die, and you will have to give an account to God for the life you've lived. And then it's interesting because in the Gospel of Luke in particular, he ends with, and then who will have your wealth? So, that's the thing. When economic independence is your big thing and you just want to be wealthy and all this, you fool, you will have to give an account to God for the way that you've lived. If I'm Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, I am shaking in that, because um heck, if I'm me and I become super wealthy, but I use that wealth for corrupt purposes and do all manner of ungodly activities with my wealth, or get my wealth through unjust means or whatever, then woe is me, for I will have to give an account to God for all of this. And so that's why all of these things are just blind alleys in which rot the corpses of the many that have tried them. So these things do not offer you eternal life. These things only offer you, at best, temporary fulfillment, temporary happiness, and um none of them offer you any eternal blessings. But Christ is the one true exit from this world. He's the one true blessing. He's the one that you can go to and have eternal life. He is the life of the world and that bread which was broken. So don't trust not in princes nor in the sons of men, for in them is not your hope found, but only in God. Thank you very much, and God bless. I know this was a little bit of a short one, but I hope and pray that it benefits you. God bless, and please share this with your friends so that they too can be freed indeed.